Hi everyone, okay, this is Garry Kasparov versus Vladimir Kramnik, played at the Novgorod tournament in Russia in 1994. Kramnik was only 18, but at the time he had a plus score against Kasparov because they'd played only twice before, with one win to Kramnik and one draw. In his early career, Kramnik was more aggressive than he has become now, and he's much more conservative these days and renowned as one of the hardest players to beat in the world. With this game, Kasparov made the score between them equal again. He opened with e4, after which came c5, so the Sicilian Defense, and knight c3, which is a move designed to disencourage the Sveshnikov variation. But regardless of that, Kramnik went into it anyway with knight c6, and then came knight ge2, which is an alternative way to play the Sicilian instead of playing knight f3. In some variations the knight will go to f4, but the game continued as a Sveshnikov with knight f6, d4, c takes d4, knight takes d4, and e5. Then came the main line, knight b d5, d6, bishop g5, a6, knight a3, b5, and knight d5. And the knight moves to the strong central square, and this d5 weakness is one of the main drawbacks of the Sveshnikov variation, although it usually ensures black the bishop pair after bishop e7 and bishop takes f6, and we're still well within the book lines, and Kramnik is a noted expert in these lines as black. The game continued bishop takes f6 and c3, which inhibits the movement of the knight on c6 and also makes space for the bad white knight on a3 to swing back over into the game. So then Kramnik castled, and knight c2, rook b8, and h4, which is a trap that's worth knowing. If black takes the pawn here with bishop takes h4, then comes queen h5, and black is winning. White is winning. Black's best move here is bishop takes f2. g5 fails to g3, so bishop takes f2, and then king takes f2, h6, and white is of course much better here. So h4, knight e7, knight takes f6 check, g takes f6, and queen d2, which is preparing both to castle queen side and to bring the queen over to the king side in order to attack. Bishop b7, bishop d3, which is the last book move, and Fritz assesses white as having a slight edge at this stage with plus 0.56 in terms of material. So d5, e takes d5, and queen takes d5, which is a nice play from Kramnik, attacking the pawn on g2, although he'd be unlikely to take this because it would open more lines towards the black king, and what it also does is seemingly inhibit white from castling queenside because the pawn on a2 would be hanging. However, Kasparov was renowned for sacrificing pawns and also pieces sometimes in order to generate initiative, which is what he did here by castling anyway. And Kramnik didn't take the pawn immediately, but first stifled white's pieces a bit by playing e4, and after bishop e2 then taking the a pawn. And here Fritz assesses the game as equal, meaning that Kasparov definitely has good compensation for the sacrificed pawn. And that initiative, or the compensation, begins with queen h6, and pretty much forces the reply queen e6. And it's wise really to bring the queen back into the game, and it's the best way to defend the f pawn. If instead knight d5, then Kasparov will be winning after rook takes d5, queen takes d5, and rook h3, threatening rook g3 with a winning attack for white. So queen e6 and knight d4, which gets the knight to a strong central square with tempo because the queen's going to have to move, and now we're seeing some of the fruits of the pawn sacrifice. White's getting a good position. So queen b6, rook h3, again threatening rook g3, which has mate threats, and forces the reply king h8. Any other move would give white a winning advantage. If, for example, say bishop c8, then rook g3 check, knight g6 is the only move to avoid mate, but then comes h5, rook d8, h takes g6, f takes g6, and rook h1. and white has a game-winning advantage over 5 pawns of material. So, king h8. Then bishop g4 with the idea of playing knight f5 and generating a crushing attack. And rook g8 is the best defense, and Kramnik found that to his credit. And now came a very interesting move from Kasparov with knight e6, which could be called a double sacrifice because both the knight on e6 and the bishop on g4 can now be taken by black. But it could also be called a tile sacrifice because it's not completely sound. With perfect play, black is okay here, and what Kasparov is doing is creating complications, another tactic for which he was famous. Moving the knight to e6 here interferes with the black queen's protection of the pawn on f6, and in fact accepting either piece is bad for black. If rook takes g4, then knight g5, and white is winning because it's impossible for black to defend the mate threat on h7. If f takes g5, then queen takes b6 with an easily winning position for white. And if instead rook takes g5, then h takes g5 again with mate threats on h7. King g8 is forced. G takes f6, mate threats on g7 now, and queen takes f6 is forced, and queen takes f6. So again, it's easily winning for white, and in fact in this position it's a forced mate in 6 moves according to Fritz. So how about taking the knight in the earlier position instead at this stage? Let's have a look. F takes e6, queen takes f6 check. Rook g7 is the only move, and now rook d7 gives white a big advantage. Best play continues. Rook b g8, bishop takes e6, bishop d5, rook takes e7, bishop takes e6, and rook g3 with a winning advantage for white. And Kramnik calculated that both of these continuations were bad for him, and he found the correct move to secure himself the advantage with, after knight e6, rook g6. And here he's definitely better. The queen has to move, and the best square for her to move to is f4, which keeps the initiative due to the attack on the rook at b8. But black is still definitely better here. He's a pawn up, and if he can consolidate, he should have a decent chance of winning the game. And Kasparov's tactic of creating complications works well here, because Kramnik didn't find the best move and played the somewhat passive rook e8. The best continuation, was bishop d5, where best play continues knight d4, b4, c4, bishop takes c4, and queen takes e4, where it's still very complicated, but white has no immediate threats. Black is a pawn up, and overall the position favors him. So rook e8 is what Kramnik played anyway. Then came rook d6, attacking the black queen, and knight d5. And for a moment the game is completely equal according to Fritz. And knight d5 was Kramnik's best hope. Other moves were weaker. For example, if queen a5, best play continues h5, rook takes g4, queen takes g4, queen a1 check. F takes e6 would still be a blunder, because now would come queen takes e6, queen a1 check, and king c2 with a big advantage for white. So queen a1 check, king c2, f takes e6, queen takes e6, knight g8, queen takes e8, e3, rook takes e3, queen a4 check, king b1, queen c4, rook takes f6, queen d5, and white is easily winning. So knight d5, and now what is the best move in this position for white? Kasparov found it, and it's a brilliant move. If you want to try and spot it, then stop the video now. Okay, what he played was h5, which was in fact the only move that ensured him the advantage. Okay, that's the end of part 1.